Hi everyone, my name's Amy and I'm a second year PhD student at Oxford. I'm really excited to tell you about some preliminary plans for a project I'm planning together with my supervisors Sage Betcher and Lawrence Hunt, which is all about deciding what to recall in working memory, and hopefully, elicit some interesting feedback from you all as well. So, in the literature, working memory is usually studied with these canonical tasks where we give people some stimuli to encode and then we tell them to recall one of the specified items. So, for example, here we give people two oriented bars, then we ask them to report the orientation of the yellow bar here, for example. So while these tasks have helped reveal much about working memory, one aspect that's missing from these is that many real-life instances of working memory use requires us to freely decide what to recall. So as opposed to, for example, say after you've been to a museum, asking you, did you like Exhibit X, which is essentially asking you to recall the value of the specific thing that you saw. An example of freely deciding what to recall in the scenario would be instead asking you, which exhibit did you like the best? Or tell me about which exhibit you liked. And our big picture question here is how does this kind of free choice recall differ from forced choice recall that is so common in these canonical tasks? We plan to use a working memory task where on each trial, participants encode the orientations of two presented bars. They then see a memory probe, which differs depending on which probe condition that trial is. So on forced recall trials, participants are asked to recall a specific item. So for example, they see a yellow fixation cross, which means that they have to report the orientation of the yellow bar. Whereas on free recall trials, they can freely choose what to recall. So here they see a gray fixation cross, which means that they're free to report the orientation of whichever bar of the two they saw earlier. Participants then report that orientation of that bar by rotating a dial clockwise or counterclockwise using their left or right hand on the keyboard. The first question we want to ask is about the differences in retrieval between when recall is forced versus when people have a free choice over what to recall. In a first hypothetical scenario, being able to choose what to recall could result in lower recall error compared to forced recall, which might happen if, when given the choice, people tend to choose to recall the better remembered item. On the other hand, free choice might result in higher recall error than forced recall, which could happen if the element of choice induces some additional cognitive demands. So in our pilot sample of only 10 participants though, the pattern of data so far seems interestingly more aligned to scenario 2 here. Additionally, people seem more likely to misattribute the orientation of one bar as belonging to the other, so that's what we call swap errors. A second question of interest in the study would be what affects what we choose to recall when we're given that choice. And to assess what information influences decisions and when it exerts that influence, we'll apply time frequency analysis to EEG data on free recall trials and examine the time course of neural lateralization signatures of visual and motor selection. There are also a couple of other things that we'd like to look at. For example, seeing if spontaneous alpha power before encoding predicts what people choose to recall. We'd be also keen to examine the neural correlates of swap errors, seeing when these correlates emerge and if they differ between free versus forced recall. So that's it from us today. Really looking forward to hearing any feedback you might have. I'd love to hear from you either in person at EPS or via email.